Now, when people make a case against the Jedi, one of the things they almost always bring up is how they supposedly kidnap very young children in order to indoctrinate them into the Jedi Order, and that they then live a life devoid of love or emotions altogether. This practice of theirs, training children from a very young age, is almost always painted in the worst possible way by those who, again, want to make a case against the Jedi for whatever reason, and it'll inevitably include much exaggeration and just pure misinformation to make the Jedi, or this practice in particular, look as bad as possible. It was even recently, as many of you know, a rather big plot point in The Acolyte, where it's almost presented as if the Jedi feel like they have some type of right to take children away from their parents in order to train them, which couldn't be further from the truth, and is where I think I'll begin trying to clear things up around this idea that Jedi kidnap children, because the Jedi do not simply take kids from their parents. They don't show up in the night and take them from their cribs and then whisk them back to the temple on Coruscant for immediate indoctrination, and then a life of being an emotionless robot or slave to the harsh Jedi code. What actually happens are the parents of a Force-sensitive child are asked if they would like to allow their children to go and be trained as a Jedi. And if they say no, the Jedi will not press the issue. They are not going to try to mind trick parents into giving up their kids or anything nefarious. They are simply going to respect their decision. Though, a few things to keep in mind when it comes to that decision made by parents, one of which is that according to George Lucas, and pretty much everything in this video will come from Lucas, and if it doesn't, I will make it clear that it doesn't. But according to Lucas, the Jedi are loved and respected by the vast majority of the people in the galaxy. When a Jedi shows up on your doorstep asking if they can take your child to be trained, this is, or so I would imagine, usually seen as a pretty great honor. And no, I'm not saying it's ever easy for a parent to give up their child. I'm not even saying I necessarily love the idea myself. I doubt there aren't usually tears shed when this happens, and that there isn't some doubt or hesitation. But there does have to be some comfort, likely a great deal, in knowing that your child is going to become a Jedi, is going to become a guardian of peace and justice across the galaxy, that they will help safeguard it against literal evil, keeping in mind that, yes, evil is real in Star Wars. It is a real thing. The dark side exists, and a very small select few will be required to safeguard everyone against it. And so, with it being such an important task, it may lead to the question of, why do Jedi take very young children? Why do they take babies, essentially? Why not wait till they're older and then they can make the decision for themselves? Why not even wait until they are adults and have a much greater understanding of what is going to be asked of them as a Jedi? And, well, I'll let this quote from George Lucas begin to answer that question. The core of Anakin's problem is that the Jedi are raised from birth, so they learn to let go of everything. They're trained more than anything else to understand the transitional nature of life, that things are constantly changing and you can't hold on to anything. You can love things, but you can't be attached to them. You must be willing to let the flow of life and the flow of the Force move through your life, move through you, so that you can be compassionate and loving and caring, but not be possessive and grabbing and holding on to things and trying to keep things the way they are. And to add on to that, for those who, again, for whatever reason, seem to think the Jedi are not allowed to love and that they suppress their emotions, despite what I just read, and think that they must be absolutely miserable living a life this way, well, Lucas has also said, when asked if Jedi are indeed lonely, he has said, "Not if you're not afraid. A Jedi is never lonely. They live on compassion. They live on helping people, and people love them. They can love people back, but when that person dies, they let go. Those that cannot let go become miserable. That's the lonely place." And so not only does this all begin to utterly destroy this strange belief or notion that the Jedi deny their emotions or suppress them somehow, that they don't allow themselves to experience any feelings, when in reality they just learn how to control their feelings, Well, this lets us know that they very much embrace the idea of love, that they are actually all about it, trained to love even, that you could even argue it's the very foundation of everything they believe in and hold true. But they're also trained to let go when they must, that only misery comes from holding on to something after it is long gone. And I say long gone because certainly a Jedi who has feelings and emotions can be sad to lose a friend or someone they care about. But to be very blunt about it, life does and must go on. And the Jedi's view is that we should try to celebrate the fact that we had them in our life, not dwell on the fact that we will never see them again. This is basically what Yoda was trying to tell Anakin in Revenge of the Sith when he was afraid to lose Padme. Yoda wasn't telling him to just suck it up and deal with death. He was saying death is inevitable. We cannot escape it. You cannot live forever. No one can live forever, and you can't save people from it happening to them. And so if we live life fearing this inevitability, then we'll be afraid to live, essentially. We'll be afraid to live to the fullest. Cherish the time you have with them, but train yourself to let go when they're gone because nothing can stop that end from coming. And this is then a big part of the reason why Jedi start training children from a very young age, to stop them from forming strong attachments and possessive love, to the point where it may prevent them from ever learning to truly let go, or maybe to stop them from, becoming obsessed with trying to save someone they love more than everyone and anyone else, and to the point where they'll even save a Sith Lord who wants to rule the galaxy for the mere chance to save their wife. And though, sure, many of us would do pretty much anything we had to do to try to save someone we love, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. There is nothing inherently wrong with us here in the real world trying to save someone we really care about. Though, of course, we're likely never going to be put in a position where we have to try to save the one we love at the risk of the very galaxy in which we live. And so, though I know it may sound harsh to you, cruel even, to deny someone possessive love when perhaps it is the best part of your life. Possessive love, or those type of relationships that you have with your friends and family, with your spouse or your children, may be your very reason for living. And though, no, Lucas isn't trying to tell you not to have those types of relationships, he's not making a case against them or anything. They can be great and indeed make life worth living, but they are not the only way to live life, the only way to find joy and meaning in life. A life of service to a greater cause can also be extremely rewarding, joyous even as Lucas himself has described it, or described how the Jedi feel about it. Yet another thing to keep in mind here is that a Jedi can leave the Order at any time, and I know the argument to that will be, or often is, something along the lines of, well, they've been brainwashed from a young age to be a Jedi. It is the only life they know, so it is going to be very hard for them to ever leave. And other than the brainwash part, it is a fair argument to think that, yeah, it would be hard to leave the only life you have ever known behind, especially when that life is a Jedi. However, we're not even entirely sure just what their training actually entails. Yes, earlier I read that quote from Lucas about how they're trained to sort of understand the transitional nature of life. But what I mean is, I don't think the Jedi are trying to, shall we say, indoctrinate them when they're very young, as so many like to describe it as. But rather, again, especially when they're very young, they're likely trying to see if they can even be trained in the first place. They're probably trying to figure out if this child is cut out to be a Jedi or not. And if they're not, I would imagine they would be returned to their parents. In fact, I would think trying to figure that out would almost be the top priority when they're, yet again, very young. It's probably the first thing they're trying to figure out or sense from a youngling when they first get to the temple, basically, or first start growing up a bit. Are they going to be cut out for this or not? And if they're not, to be blunt, there's no sense in wasting their time and the time of the child trying to train them in vain. It is best to get them back to their parents so they can live a normal life, potentially. Or at least that's what my guess would be. This is not coming from Lucas. This is just something I would assume is the case. And I'm not really sure if Lucas has ever talked about what happens to children that flunk out of the Jedi Order at a young age. And kind of going along with all this, trying to figure out if someone can even handle being a Jedi or not in the first place, well, George Lucas has said that even though, yes, everyone in the Star Wars galaxy does have free will, they also have a destiny should they choose to follow it. which I would imagine means there is a plan for them that will, in a sense, lead to their best or most fulfilling life. And if the Force does have a destiny for everyone, or if they have one by default, or however their destiny is determined, I would then imagine some people are destined to be Jedi, which is why they're Force sensitive in the first place. In other words, if you're very strong with the Force, it's likely an indication you were meant to be a Jedi. And so the Jedi might even make that assumption that we're finding the people who we're supposed to find, whose best life, or most fulfilling and most enjoyable life, is to be a Jedi. And if that is the case, the Jedi would see taking a child who is quite clearly strong with the Force as helping that child find their destiny, helping them become the best version of themselves they could be, helping them find the life they would even want to find. Again, this isn't something George Lucas has specifically said, but just kind of something that makes sense given some of the things he has said. I don't think Force sensitivity is just completely random. It may kind of look that way, but I think if you have it, if you are strong with the Force, you were likely destined to do something with it, which is why you were given it, and then is also the reason why you have a high midichlorian count, keeping in mind what midichlorians allow you to do is hear the Force, hear the will of the Force. And so if you are strong with the Force and able to hear its will, you were likely destined to become a Jedi. It ties in very nicely with the symbiotic circle George Lucas loves to talk about. It's even kind of like poetry, it kind of rhymes. And so, in closing here, I hope I have debunked some of the lies and or flat-out misconceptions around this practice by the Jedi. Which isn't to say I think here in the real world it is ever right for virtually any reason for a child to be taken away from their parents, even with consent, and then trained to be a part of an organization that they will serve for the rest of their life. But there is no Force here in the real world. There is no dark side, and thus we don't need Jedi to safeguard us from the Sith, potentially. Plus, yeah, Star Wars is a story, one where George Lucas is trying to make a point about how an inability to let go, even to things we really don't want to let go, can be unhealthy for us. Which isn't to say we can't mourn the loss of loved ones. Of course we can and will and should. We should also try to fight to save the people we love if it is in our means. But as I said before, we can't just live our lives afraid of the end or of what we're inevitably going to lose along the way. We should cherish the time we have and the time we have with others. Enjoy it to the fullest. And that can't be done when you do everything you can to hold on to it, where you're holding on to it so tightly, you're missing out on enjoying it until it's gone and you're only left with regrets for not enjoying it while you could. Well, that's going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about this one. Tell me what you think about the Jedi taking very young children and training them to be Jedi. Is this an understandable practice given the circumstances of their galaxy? Or is it just never acceptable, or do you think they need to try to find a better way? Whatever you think, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.